You're listening to Around Comics. 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 You're listening to Around Comics. Welcome back to another episode of Around Comics, episode 366. I am Brian Salazar. With me, as always, is my partner in crime, Christopher Niesman. And with us is a special guest, all-star comic book creator, artist. You may know him from such books as Transmetropolitan, The Boys, Space Beaver.
What everybody knows.
Everybody knows Space Beaver. Darick Robertson. Darick, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Welcome.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me back. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, you were actually just here a month and a half ago on our 30 Minutes With interview show to talk about Space Bastards, which I got a delivery in the mail a couple days ago. Very excited. So I've got to read volume 2 now, but yeah. So we had you and your co-creators from Space Bastards, Eric and Joe, with you, but you got the spotlight by yourself tonight.
Right on. Well, I always like hanging out with Eric and Joe. They're good guys.
Absolutely, and that was a fun time. But
they crack me up.
It's but me talking with you guys, it's like I coming into it, I was like, okay, Eric and Joe haven't done a ton of comics. And Darick has been doing comics for 20-ish years now. And I just
30.
don't. Is it 30 now? Wow, we're all getting old. I didn't want to just like talk about The Boys all night long,
Thank you.
with
I like it at all, but
Yeah, for sure. So 30 years. I was thinking about this today. It kind of feels like you're a creator that's kind of just been there for a long time and always does quality work.
Oh, thanks. I don't always see that, but I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, but I mean, you've done hundreds of issues of comics, but it doesn't seem like you're always on the stands, which is kind of nice from my perspective, because whenever something of yours comes out, I know I'm going to enjoy it. And you've done long runs on comics, but are you conscious of that? Is that just kind of your work style? Do you just kind of make sure that you put stuff out at a quality that's going to be kind of maintained?
In the last few years, quality has become super important to me. I mean, I've always tried to do good work. But for a lot of my early career, especially back in the 90s when it was quantity over quality, like good enough had to be. You were there. I was just constantly being asked to produce work. And unless the editor sent it back and said, this is no good, I just kept putting out work as fast as I could. And that was sort of like the competition was doing the same at the time. So it wasn't like I didn't see that there was a big standard to live up to. I just would do the best I could. Also, I was working in this kind of extreme style that was popular at the time, sort of trying to be somebody I wasn't. And it wasn't until I got around to Transmetropolitan that I started to kind of do work that I wanted to do based on what my ethics were, my interests were. But then I still had to do that at a super fast pace because we were always up against the gun on the deadlines. So I wasn't inking my own work then. It wasn't until I got to The Boys after a brief run on Wolverine that I got to ink my own stuff consistently. And it was a little bit of a learning curve. Some of my early inks are kind of heavy, but I think I'm getting better at it now. And I kind of retreated from that mainstream having a monthly title. And I realized that was kind of burning me out. I learned that on The Boys. So when I kind of stepped back from that, I put more of an interest in creating original stuff I wanted to put more original creator-owned work out there, and then at the same time, really trying to have control of my schedule and my inking and everything, so I could craft a book, which is what I like to do now, because my favorite artists were like that. And, they weren't known for putting stuff out constantly, but when they did, it was an event. So if you got a Dave Gibbons book or a Brian Bolland book or something like that, or Barry Windsor Smith, these people were like, they were crafting their own work and finishing it. In Brian Bolland's case, he went on to color his own stuff, so I realized if I want to be like my heroes, I got to do what my heroes do. And so I've tried to walk along that line. One of my favorites.
I mean, I think for all of us, we're roughly the same age. I think that was a book that impact, and we're talking about Camelot 3000 is what I showed for the audio listeners.
Yeah.
And that was a book that I think
he was inked by Terry Austin in that, wasn't he?
I think so.
I don't think he did his own inking in that, but I own some of the original art. I love
yeah. Oh, do you? Wow.
Yeah. I bought it way back. I was before he went digital. I started buying up whatever Brian Bolland work I could get my hands on.
Yeah, Bruce Patterson, Terry Austin, and a little Dick Giordano inking in there for an issue.
His stuff is so tight, though. You could tell that they knew exactly what to do with it.
Oh yeah. But I think that's a book that changed the way that a lot of us looked at comics.
It was like the first time they put it out as a maxi series. It wasn't built to be an ongoing thing. It was built to be a limited story, and so you really the stakes really were higher with that too, which I thought was great because Live or Die, it was 12 issues, so you didn't know which characters were going to make it to the end, and some of them don't make it, and it's just great fun. If I had my wish, I would do Camelot 4000.
That would be awesome. It was the first maxi series, right?
Yes, I believe it was. Yeah. They were just starting to experiment with that kind of stuff. For your viewers, if you see me wiping my eyes, it's because I'm not wearing my glasses and I'm getting eye strain. I'm not getting emotional over Camelot 3000.
we have that effect on people.
Brian Bolland makes a lot of people teary, I think.
Well, that's true.
For sure. What were some of your other early influences?
My first memory of comics were kind of random. I remember a lot of Gold Key comics, Bugs Bunny, and Richie Rich. Whatever my sister was, I have an older sister, and whatever she was reading, and I would sort of get handed down. So I find myself with a lot of those classic Marvel romance comics and
Archie, a lot of romance,
and Richie Rich, which I really loved. I loved Richie Rich. Those were so inventive. But I actually really got a lot out of those romance comics that I didn't realize until I was much older and illustrated. I'm like, that was a great, because they had really good talented Marvel guys working on those romance comics alongside the superhero stuff. And the storytelling is that's where I learned a lot about how to make quiet moments dramatic, also drawing people kissing is hard. It's a difficult thing to draw.
It's so funny that you brought that up, because as soon as you said it, it clicked in my head of I can absolutely see that in your work, the romance comics and the idea that there's not always going to be these gigantic action moments,
right? And they shouldn't be. That's also another thing just brings us back around Camelot 3000. What was so great about that is how powerful the quiet moments are, and that's something that I've always tried to bring into my own stuff. And one of the first superhero people that I really discovered, just like you predicted.
Hi, Tom.
Tom is on time. He's on Tom time.
I'm on my time.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, how's it going?
Well, I really like one of the first artists that stood out to me was Neil Adams, and it's because I had those Peter Pan read-along books. I mean, this one I was really young. So, but they had, do you remember those Peter Pan records? And you put the record on, then read the comic along with it.
Yeah,
sure. They would act it all out audibly. It was really cool. I had a Man Bat one, when they introduced the Man Bat. And the art in that is just phenomenal. And the way he did the lighting and the drama. And, it was like a horror comic and a superhero comic in one. So that was one of the first times I really started paying attention. That and his, I had a Superman record, which had a Neil Adams cover, him flying up, and I think they did a photo stat of a city behind him. But Superman always, Neil Adams sort of defined those characters for me. So what Superman looks like, Batman looks like in my head, or Aquaman, those characters, it's either Jose Garcia Lopez whose Atari Force I loved around the same time. I loved Camelot 3000, and then it was Neil Adams. So like he was one of the first artists that I really started paying attention to his name and style, especially that Superman versus Muhammad Ali. Like that, there's so much of that influenced Transmetropolitan in ways that I could never explain. But he made those environments so believable. And the amount of detail he put in, even on the cover where you can see all these celebrities in the audience, and they had a little map on the inside of Sonny Bono and Alfred E.
And I miss the Treasury edition size. I just love that format, that size. It's that's what I love about a lot of the Neil Adams reprints that I have. You know, it's they did those at the big Treasury size, and
I used to love those, and they were like $1, and that seemed like a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Was that more pleasure or pain doing all that for Transmet? I mean, because you look at
it was I loved it. I just wish that I'd always wished Rodney Ramos, that book wouldn't exist without Rodney Ramos's incredible ability. Him and Nathan Irene and Clem Robbins, like we were such a solid get it in on time, get it out there team, which is unusual for that long of a run, that I never say this without prefacing it with how much I appreciate his excellent work. But I always wanted to ink it myself because I would end up having time in between scripts waiting for stuff to come in that I could be doing the inking. And I felt like I could have been solely focused on the book. But as a result, I would end up taking on other work while I was waiting for script so I could keep, an income flowing in between waiting for script. And so I would put as much as I could into it, but I also had to turn it around faster so I could give, Rodney and Nathan the time to do their job, and Clem, of course. So it was like sort of a catch-22. I loved doing it, but I wish there was so much more I wanted to do with it. Like that, you could see it on the covers. I inked my own covers on Transmetropolitan, but it's like I wish so much that I could have done more with it because I was young and didn't have kids yet and had a lot of energy, and now I'm not so young and I have kids, and
when was the last
but the best experience I've had in that on that notion, it was Hellblazer Rise and Fall that I just did with Tom Taylor, and that was just him and me, just the two of us. And that was good. That was a real joy. It ended up being a pretty lengthy book, even though there's only 3 issues. They were all 44 pages each. And Tom was a joy to work with, and the whole team got along great. And then when the new editors came on after the layoffs happened and we lost our original editor, Andy Curry, the new editors were very supportive, even though I had kind of a rough couple of months towards the end of the book there, but they were like, no, we figured out a date that would work for everybody, and they gave me a little bit of time to wrap it up, and they didn't bring people in, which sometimes people do. And so I ended up getting to do a whole thing. I really got to craft that book, and I'm proud of it. So
it's we talked about it several times on the show, and I mean, you've always been good, but that was a level up, man.
Thank you.
It was really, really good. How do you like that format?
Love it.
Are the pages different size?
Yeah, actually they are. They're almost 1:1 to what gets printed. So I end up doing them in a different dimension. So when it's printed, that's actually the size I worked at. I was surprised to see how close that is to the actual size of the art. And that's what I liked about those Treasury editions, is they were published at 11:17, which was the size of the art.
I love that format for that book. I really want more of that. I think it gives you a little room to breathe, and I thought it was some of your best work ever. Honestly, I thought it was a great book, and Tom wrote a great story. And we, like Chris said, we talked about it multiple times on the show, just because every issue that came out, we were raving about, and it just looks so amazing.
Thank you. Well, I mean, that's a great team. I'm working with Diego Rodriguez on the colors there, and he's my favorite go-to colorist. And we had, like I said, a lot of support from editorial. They really let us, for the most part, they let us alone, just reminded us on deadlines. And then when I needed a little bit of time, they were like, oh yeah, we can make that work. And that meant a lot to me. It's a big difference than getting rushed or having them pull it away and give it to somebody else last minute, because that's like when you're watching you're watching Walking Dead and you go to a commercial and it comes back and somebody else is playing Rick. You know, wait a second, that's not the same guy.
It's the old Bewitched strip. Bewitched.
Yeah, right. I don't like getting darrened. I don't like getting darrened. So that was a really good book for that example. That I got to do what I wanted to do with it, and I was proud of how I made it. I'm proud of how it came out. And Tom was a joy to work with. We're looking for another project together as soon as possible. He's just a busy guy, but man, his dialogue is so good.
It is.
It's the first time I actually got to really draw Constantine at length too, and it seemed like a real natural fit.
It worked well, and there's some risque scenes, and as Sal and I think discussed. So it's a very British ending, the way that he gets out of it.
Yeah, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. He's just such a great character, and he emotes, and he's just such a troublemaker that it's like he's a lot of fun to draw.
Nice.
Well,
go ahead, Sal.
Oh, I had a question. Funny enough, I actually have met you before at Cherry Capital Con of I don't know how many years ago.
God, I don't remember that convention.
Small convention.
What city was that?
It's Traverse City, Michigan.
Oh yeah, wait, I remember doing wasn't that the only time I remember doing a con in Michigan was the Detroit Motor City Con.
I think it was called the Cherry.
I only remember the only time I remember being in Michigan was for the Motor City Comic Con.
Well, maybe my memory's wrong.
How long ago was this?
Probably 7 years ago, something like that.
The only one I would have done even in the last 10 years would have been Motor City. If it was within the last 10 years,
it must have been somewhere else. Well, I thought.
Is it Steve? Are you getting him confused with Steve Dillon?
Maybe it wasn't me.
Well, no, Steve Dillon was there. Steve Dillon was there, and I actually did an interview with Steve, and I can't remember the writer, a guy who wrote Deadpool for a while. Who's linked to that convention. Anyway, but I did an interview with both of them, and one of the questions I asked them is because over their careers, they both worked on characters that I would describe as bastards. And I think you fit right in with that.
Yeah.
And my question to them was, is it more fun to work with bastards than it is the good guys? Sometimes
I enjoy them both equally. I mean, for me, it's not really, I just like whatever character I'm on, I try to do the best with that character that I can do. I've never there's some like more mechanical based characters get boring to draw because they don't emote and you have to keep track of all the detail. But like Cable was like that. But I really like drawing Wolverine because he had so much room to emote. And Constantine for the same reason, but I'm currently working on Batman, and I've really been enjoying drawing Batman just as much as I enjoyed drawing Constantine. So
you worked on Wolverine. Was it kind of right before the Hugh Jackman pivot?
Around the same time, it was like we had just X2 had just come out when I was about 3 or 4 issues into my Wolverine run.
Because that was you and Greg Rucka. It was a great run,
which I had a great time working with Greg. But
nice.
That was, but then that was when they wanted him to be on model. So we, like my vision of him was, quickly,
about 8 inches taller.
Yeah. They wanted a splash page that I had drawn for issue 6, where they're at the bar, Nightcrawler and Logan are at the bar, and I drew it with them out in the pouring rain. And I take the Marvel handbooks very seriously. I did since I was a young kid loving Marvel. So if Scott Summers is 6'1", and I pretty sure I think Kurt is like around 5'11", and I know that Logan is 5'3" from the handbook. You guys can correct me if you got the handbook stats with Andy.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
But I drew Logan and Kurt 5'11", 5'3", and they made me make them even, and that just made me crazy. Like that's not either Kurt's 5'3" or Logan is, but if they're the same height, they still put that in the Marvel handbook. Like it's not like they changed it. If they changed it, said okay, Wolverine's 6'3" now according to the Marvel handbook. Them's the rules, but it's kind of like being in the middle of a chess game and all of a sudden someone's doing checker moves.
Yeah.
All
Everybody's
right, I'm looking it up, guys. I'm almost there. I almost have a definitive answer.
Well, you mentioned the latest character that you've been able to work on, and it's a little bit of a change for you. First of all, it's Batman. You are both writing and drawing Legends of the Dark Knight.
Yeah.
So first of all, how big of a thrill is it to work on Batman? And is this your first mainstream write and draw gig?
No.
Okay.
It's not known for it. I've done actually a lot of well, I wouldn't say a lot of it. I've never really done like a monthly run on anything like that. But mainstream, I wrote and drew a special issue of Conan the Barbarian for Dark Horse called The Weight of the Crown, about 2009. I wrote and drew a number of Spider-Man stories that got published in some of the super specials, and then an entire issue of Spider-Man Team Up back in the 90s with Gambit. I do. So I wrote and drew that, and I wrote and drew Space Beaver originally. Not that sure. Not that that's mainstream, but I started out as my own writer artist. So it just, for me, I have a hard time justifying writing my own stuff unless I have a real burning idea that I want to do, which this Batman story was. Because I wrote it when I was a teenager dreaming of breaking into DC. I had the original plot in mind. And so to actually get to bring it to fruition and having it be published as a #1 is like a big deal for me.
Oh, it's
like a childhood dream come true. But the other stuff that I did, I like it, but I can't justify it when, if you say to me like, hey, Tom Taylor wants to do another book with you, I'm not going to stop and go, no, I don't want to work with Tom again, or Greg Rucka again, or any of a number of really talented
I can imagine you saying, like Grant Morrison. It's like, you know what, Grant? I got this. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, well, when you got talented people like that and they want to work together, you make time for that. It's like it's writing my own stories. It's not like I've enjoyed it. But it's a lot of responsibility, and it also, I'm having worked with such great writers. It's like I'm afraid of my own writing falling short. But then I have to remind myself, if it wasn't any good, DC wouldn't just be putting it out there to do me a favor. They would go, sorry, Darick, your story sucks. So, but I take the writing as seriously as I do the drawing, and I put as much work into crafting that, and I write a full script, and then I hate myself when I'm drawing later, because some of the things that I put myself through, I'm like, what was I thinking? I could have made him in a desert. I could have put this in a snowstorm,
So you full write the script, and then before you start penciling anything?
I got, with the Batman, I got a little looser because I knew I was going to be, filling in the gaps, but I write it all out. I don't just sit down and draw the pages or make it up as I go like I did with Space Beaver originally.
Work Marvel style with yourself.
Are we going to see Space Beaver in Space Bastards possibly? I feel
maybe as a cameo, maybe in a background. Actually, if you look through the years, I've actually put Space Beaver in a number of things, starting all the way back to my very first DC comic ever, which was the Flash TV super special that had a photo of John Wesley Shipp in costume on the cover. And I was the very first work I got. I was picking up somebody else's. My friend David wasn't able to finish the story on time, so I came in and finished up this Kid Flash story that Mark Waid had written. So the first guy I ever worked with at DC was Mark Waid. Not bad.
You do have a way of getting all of the primo writers, man. Like right off the bat.
They get me.
Yes. But sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, they but it was fun because but they had it was at a carnival, so I made Space Beaver like the guy in the costume, like, so all these kids are hanging around the guy in the Space Beaver costume. And like in the boys, there was a place, if there's ever usually a need for a stuffed animal or the Authority, I did this, like I usually throw a Space Beaver in there as the stuffed animal, so he makes cameos throughout a lot of my stuff.
That's awesome.
Wolverine is 5'3", 195 pounds.
That's thick.
And a great sentence here. Apparently, at the same time that adamantium was bonded to his skeleton, he was also equipped with claws. That apparently is kid doing a lot of work there by whoever wrote that entry.
But how tall is Kurt? How tall is Nightcrawler?
Oh, God. Now, okay. Let me look it up.
Tom is the research department tonight.
I'm on it.
Well,
We've always you listed 5'11".
That was
So
my
that
guess.
we're locking that in. Let's see.
Not to
Give me a minute.
not to belabor Space Beaver, but I am. It always is interesting to me, someone's first work or very early work, and sort of.
I was 17. I created it in high school when I was 16. I got 17 by the time it got published. That's why I've had such a long career, is because my first work came out when I was like just getting my driver's license.
Seriously.
That's pretty amazing, though. I mean, was that at a time? I mean, that was right around the time of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I'm assuming.
Well, that was. I didn't know much about it at the time. I had just discovered that comic book stores existed, maybe a year or two before, and I was going to a local comic book shop, and apparently the owner of the shop. I wasn't aware of this trend, but black and white comics had blown up huge in the mid 80s because of Ninja Turtles. Mm-hmm. Every retailer was like looking to have the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. So everybody and his brother who could put out a black and white funny animal comic was doing so.
Radioactive black belt hamsters.
Them and Fish Police came out, black belt radioactive hamsters, all these different titles that looked and sounded like something like Ninja Turtles, in the hopes that they would be the next one in line. And what it did is it glutted the market. It imploded just about the time we got Space Beaver onto the market. And I was like, typical of my career. I show up at the party just before things end. So right before the lights come on.
Wait, so something got really popular in comics.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there were a ton of comics that were trying to emulate it.
Isn't it
that
crazy?
happened. That happened.
Like every decade. Happened in the 90s with the with the image boom.
Mm-hmm.
So were you? I mean, you had said you had read comics and stuff, but were you interested in drawing comics and making comics before that? Were you doing stuff before that, or was that just sort of an opportunity that lent itself to your
before Space Beaver?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I had my dreams. My hopes and dreams were all pinned on being a professional comic book artist. If you saw, I have actually a really great story about meeting Matt Groening when he was just doing the Life and Hell books at my very first San Diego Comic-Con. And this was back when it was at the old convention center downtown before they moved out by the bay. And I'd never been to a San Diego Comic-Con before, but because I went with this publisher I was working with, I came in with this orange tag, which was like the pro tag at the time. So I was walking around the floor just trying to get any editor I could to look at my portfolio, which had pictures of Rogue and Spider-Man and sample pages of X-Men and stuff like that in it. And I had no belief that I was being published with Space Beaver at the time, but I had no belief that was, I never would have imagined that's where my career started. It was just more of a lark. It was literally something I did to entertain myself in summer school, but people liked it and there was this trend happening. So I ended up getting published and it kind of started my career. But I ended up walking up to Matt Groening because I was a big fan of those Life and Hell books. And this is way before Simpsons.
Yeah.
And, but I went up and I was like, oh, I love your work. And we started talking. He was the nicest person. And he said, oh, you got an orange tag. You're a professional. And I have my portfolio there. And I said, yeah. He goes, let me see what you do. And I said, okay. So I was so excited. And then I showed him my portfolio. And again, he was looking at like page after page of superhero pinups and, sequential story of X-Men fighting and all the stuff that I thought was going to give me a job. And he just goes, well, I see we have nothing in common. Then he got called away for to do a panel. So that was my meeting with Matt Groening. But years later, after The Simpsons got going, and I was working at Marvel, and a few years have gone by, I ran into him again at a booth at San Diego during like the first, I think, second season of Simpsons was on, and he totally remembered me. He remembered Space Beaver, and it was very nice. Like he signed my animation cell that I had bought because I could afford one. So I have that on my wall. It's signed Matt Groening, drew a little Bart for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very cool.
It's always nice when you meet someone like that.
Yeah, and then they stayed nice. Like he was just nice every time I'd see him. He was like, my friend. My friend Dana Gould ended up being a producer on the show, and I did him a favor, and then I got this box of like great Simpsons swag, like a a Duff T-shirt and hats, and little bendable figures, and at the bottom is a signed script from the comic book episode of The Simpsons. But Matt again did me a Bart and signed it, so I have a
Dana Gould, the comedian.
Yeah,
Your friends? Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, we go way back before he was super famous.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm a huge comic stand-up comedian fan. So
I know a lot of people that when they were in the infancy of their careers. So as I was mine, because I lived in San Francisco back in the early 90s, and my now brother-in-law is Matt Weinhold. He's a stand-up comic. So we shared an apartment, and I'd be like drawing comics until like 11, 12 at night. He'd get done with his, stand-up gigs, and we'd all go down to this bar in San Francisco, and all the comedians that he knew, they'd all kind of gather at this place after they got done with their stand-up gigs, and we'd hang out and drink and get to know each other and hang out and go to house parties and stuff. So I met a lot of people back in the day.
That's cool.
Tom has a question.
Oh,
they were always interested in me because I didn't do stand-up comedy. So I was the one guy in the group that I wasn't a comedian trying to find a gig. I was doing comics and doing pretty good at it because I was working on New Warriors at the time. I had a monthly book.
I'm sure there's a lot of confusion there. People would say, "What do you do?" You say, "Oh, I'm in comics."
Yeah, right.
With all the
draw comics. You do comedy.
I've confirmed Nightcrawler's height.
Did you find it?
I found it. It's 5'9".
Oh, I was off by 2 inches.
By 2 inches. And contrary to appearances, he does not literally turn invisible in Deep Shadow.
He's camouflaged.
Yeah, he's camouflaged. There's like a little note next to it, like some editor has written that like 1,000 times to people, and now they're just putting it.
But still 5'3" and 5'9".
Yeah, that's a good distance
at least.
You know what I never understood is they called Cyclops slim, but he's jacked. He's like,
well, he got progressively jacked. That's the thing. I was thinking about the way Kirby used to draw him. Kirby he drew him kind of like tall and skinny.
Yeah, but I always thought that was kind of funny because it's like, yeah, he's not slim.
By the time he got jacked, like when Jim Lee started drawing,
he's ripped.
Yeah, he started out with that Barry Allen physique to start with. It's I think Tom, we talked to Infantino a few years ago, and he talked about how Barry should be thin because he
runs all the time.
Yeah, he runs.
He's a runner.
Shouldn't be jacked.
Well, I always liked when John Byrne kind of redid Submariner. He did that Submariner run, and he kind of recreated that character design a little bit. He was like made him look like a swimmer. He didn't look necessarily like football player anymore.
That's the thing. It was like in the 90s, it felt like there was a lot of pressure to make everybody ever more muscular. Like I look back on that stuff, and it's like I wish that like I drew, Speedball, and I made him. Everybody had giant thighs and legs that were too long in that part of my career, but I was again, just happy to be getting the work. That's the kind of thing that I look back on now and go, oh.
Well, speaking of like character redesigns and that kind of stuff, are there any character redesigns that you were a part of that you look back on and say that was really cool, or the inverse that was horrible?
I still like the Firestar design that I did that George Perez ended up drawing from my design, and that was cool to see George drawing Firestar and with the costume that I made up for. Because I always thought that they made her for animation originally, so that and it was John Romita that actually designed the original Firestar.
Really?
But the carnival mask seemed weird to me. Like I didn't quite understand that, and then the all yellow outfit was just a way of avoiding anything complicated because it was animation, and so it seemed strange to me that one endured as much as it has. But I guess there's a nostalgic attachment to it because it was on Saturday morning. So in the 90s, everybody was getting assigned, after, the X-Men got leather jackets, thanks to Jim's awesome redesigns, like then everybody started getting leather jackets. So I got in on it, and I gave Firestar a leather jacket, but I put her a big star on her back, and I gave her goggles instead of the
fan mask.
Yeah. With the carnival mask. They look like something from Mardi Gras. And so I like that. I was proud of that design. It ended up on the poster. I did a New Warriors poster at one point a lot of those characters I got to redesign and kind of make them my own. And then Fabian and I collaborated on the Fabian Nicieza, the writer. We collaborated on the new looks for them, and I liked it. I was proud of those. But there's a lot that I can't think off the top of my head who else I did do designs for. But I mean the boys, but those were original. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, it's interesting. I mean, I always appreciated the fact that like Butcher looked more like a longshoreman or something.
Yeah, that's what I was going for, ex-soldier. Yeah. And then Garth, I always pick the writer's brains for what actors they're imagining, and so he said Robert Shaw. So I was
nice.
It was inspired by Robert Shaw. So.
That fits absolutely.
For me, I discovered Simon Pegg watching.
What was your reaction whenever they cast Simon Pegg to play Huey's dad?
Oh, I was pushing for it. I was so happy.
It was awesome.
I went through I had this long spiel fighting back against Simon himself because he and I got to be friends, but like pushing back even on Simon himself and saying, no, the character is not age specific. All you have to do is his heart has to be broken. And he's like, I'm too old, and he said, I'm getting to be too old for it. And so when it came around, I was going to hopefully have Eric Kripke twist his arm, and talk him into doing it. And so I kept reaching out to Eric Kripke leading up to season 1. And so I said, have you reached out to Simon Pegg? And then I got the email back. He's in my office right now. I was like, yes. So I had to keep it total mum's the word. It was, they kind of revealed it at a convention months later, but up until then I was just like, I wish I could say, because all these people were writing on Twitter, is Simon Pegg going to play Huey? And I'm like, no, but he's going to play Huey's dad. And that was like the best cameo ever.
It was brilliant because whenever I first started watching the series, I was like, man, I really wish Simon Pegg that they've been able to get him. And then they introduced him as the dad, and I was like, oh yeah, he's too old to play Huey now.
Yeah, but I mean, back in the day, he was the movie got optioned in 2008. The property got optioned in 2008, and it took 11 years for it to actually become the TV show. So, but it went on this wild roller coaster ride. But originally, like Adam McKay was going to do a trilogy with the boys, and he had done all kinds of preliminary work on it, and just for whatever reason, we couldn't get a studio to greenlight it. But even though they kept optioning it, but but Simon was always on the short list to play Huey. It just didn't work out.
It was funny about the gap in time from whenever it was published to the time that it made it to Amazon as a TV show. I was online reading comments, which you should never do, and some guy is just going off about the scene with the Deep getting the blowjob.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, why do they have to bring all this Me Too stuff into into these series? And I was just like, dude, the exact same scene happened in the comic 8 years ago, like 6 years before Me Too. So it was it was very funny.
In Q3, and that was back in 2007.
Yeah.
So the thing that happened, I saw an article pop up. It was kind of regurgitating on. I have family members that'll send me an article as if I don't know what's going on. But an article came up on I think it was a Screen Rant or something, said how it was really great that they changed this for the TV show, and that they framed a lot of people framed the scene in the comic is that Annie was attacked or raped, and she wasn't. And that's really important because she is literally given a choice. She can walk out the door, no problem. Like nobody lays a hand on her. They shouldn't do what they did. Don't get me wrong. But the 7 are scumbags. And that's the whole point of the thing is these are bad people doing bad things. However, one of the things they did not do was attack her. They gave her a choice, and she chose poorly. And so, and that's the point. And Garth was basing that stuff on things that he loves James Ellroy novels and stuff like that. And that was based on stories from Hollywood casting couches back in the 30s. That's
exactly what
it wasn't based on some fabrication. This is kind of junk is happening. That the only thing about the Me Too movement is now we actually have a spotlight on it because it actually people are starting to say, yeah, that happened to me, and it needs to. it used to be in the shadows, and it's just getting the rock's been overturned. But the fact that we did it back in the comic, it's very important for that story arc. And Raynor is never getting attacked either. They're having grudge sex, like she's willing. She just hates herself for wanting it, and Butcher's all too happy to take advantage of it. Says he's not a great guy either.
No, they're they all have.
There's two nice people in the whole thing, and Annie and Hughie are probably it. And then they even make their mistakes. So.
Yeah, and even they make some irredeemable decisions. They're not totally irredeemable.
One of the great things about a Garth Ennis story is everybody's kind of morally compromised.
Was the Boys the first property that you've been involved with to translate over into a different medium, into TV?
Technically, no. I
Happy,
co-created
right?
Happy. Yeah, I didn't. I wasn't involved in the show, and they didn't really show my credit. It's buried at the end if you want to wait for it. And then back when I was in the 90s, I did a comic book called Nightman. I co-created a book called Nightman for Malibu's Ultraverse. And for whatever reason, even though that company went down, like that property wouldn't die. They made an action figure and they made a TV show, and it's exactly my costume that I designed, and I didn't get any credit or any money from either of those things.
Oh, man. With the Boys, you mentioned some of that. So how involved have you been with the TV show of the Boys?
Well, I know everybody pretty well at this point. Like I'm friendly with Kripke, and I've met all the cast. It was really nice. They're filming season 3, and a couple friends of mine that work on the other side of the camera were walking around, and I was getting hellos from the cast. And it was really nice. Like they were, Anthony Starr said, "Hey, brother," and I'm like, "Oh, that's nice." So but I'm friends with Jack Quaid at this point. Like he and I text each other, and he kind of gives me the inside dope. Like, "How's it going? Is everybody getting along?" It's been nice. I'm sad because I can't go up there because of COVID, but normally I'd be on set at least once for season 3. But I was there for a little bit for 1 and 2. But I don't really get I'm not in the writer's room or anything, and I don't hire people I don't cast people. I get weird emails now, people going, "You should really check this person out." I'm like, I'm sure they're great. That's not my department.
Yeah, you're right. I'm writing Batman, dude.
Yeah,
I'm
the dude that did the comic. I got co-executive producer is a title, but they hired me to do artwork for the show, and I'm doing some for season 3. It's been nice. Like you see a lot of my artwork around, especially in season 2. There was that whole segment where they're doing the storyboards for the movie presentation. Like they hired me to do all those storyboards. I did like 25 of them. They used 7, but that was a lot of fun. And so because they featured them, and then when they walk into that planet Vought and you see all the artwork on the walls of the superheroes, like 90% of that is mine. Like I did most of those hero shots and things like that. And the very first image you see at the very first episode is a illustration of the 7 that they hired me specifically to do, and then that becomes it all falls together and becomes the Vought logo.
Is it weird seeing it be like zeitgeist popular?
Yeah, the zeitgeist part of it is really strange because it was just it was so in my mind and just part of my family and friends world for so long that to see everybody, like when I saw people in Homelander costumes at rallies, I was like, whoa, I'm through the looking glass on this now.
Dude, I live in Wisconsin.
I
love Wisconsin.
I know, it's easy.
I was at hanging out at my curling club. And this is before we had the Space Bastards talk and hanging out.
That may be the most Wisconsin thing you could have said.
So I'm at the curling club, and I'm going to be talking to the co-creator of The Boys tonight. And they were like, "Really?" Everybody knows that show now. People love it.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it's a much better calling card than it used to be. And I can. I was at I had to purchase a car today. And at the end of the thing, like we started to get off we're just trying to get the paperwork signed. If you've ever bought a car, you know what I mean? And but he said, "So what do you do for a living?" I'm like, and my wife interrupted and said, "We'll get back to that." If we start talking about it, that's all we're going to talk about. And we're going to get this paperwork signed. So at the very end of the thing, he had a little Winter Soldier Falcon toy, and he has a reason for it being on his desk. It's not that he was a big fan. It was a gift from a little kid that was driving him crazy, but but it looked like A-Train for a minute there. And I said, I thought that might be. And I said to my wife, I didn't even say it to him. I said, I thought that may be A-Train. And he goes, I wish it was A-Train. That would be cool. Wait till I tell you. I got a picture of me and Jesse Usher on, he's in costume and stuff, like for my season 1 visit. So I just pulled it up at the end. I'm like, that's me. And he's like, what? So it's a much better calling card than it used to be.
Nice. You need to do that
on the car. The paperwork.
Yes.
What's that?
You need to do that before the paperwork.
Yeah,
like squeeze a little extra.
Deal was already worked out. And we're buying a used car. My kids were in a car accident. Our other car got totaled, and they're fine, thank God. But we had to replace the car, so we were out there taking care of that.
Before the first season hit, was there any expectation that Anthony Starr would sort of take over?
I mean, I knew because they sent me an early cut like months and months before the world saw it, and I had this really weird moment where I couldn't talk to anybody about it, and because I'm under an NDA for most of this stuff, but I couldn't help but like notice how good he was, and my wife doesn't, like, we're kind of the opposite attracts couple where she has much better taste in arts and literature than I do, but I love comics and toys, and she tolerates it. But she loves me, so it works out. But she will love Game of Thrones and Sopranos, and like the most gut-wrenching serial killer drama. Like, she loved Dexter. Like, she loves that, but I can't get her to sit through a Marvel movie because they're, quote, too loud. So
sounds like my wife.
Yeah, it's
sounds like all of our wives.
But so
they are loud.
Well, they are. But when we all sat down to watch this early cut of The Boys, and I only could show it to my family, she was like, and it was like none of the special effects were done or anything. It was like just a real rough cut. But when it was all over, she goes, I cannot wait to see the next one. And I knew that was not just because it was our thing. I don't even think she had really read the comics. She was just really loved the show and still does. And so I thought that was a good harbinger that, okay, this might do something, but the reaction to it has been just, I still don't fully understand it because my world hasn't changed all that much, but at the same time, like, I'm deeply grateful that everybody likes the show. I just don't quite know how to process it because it's so well received. It's doing so. I mean, we won the Rotten Tomatoes Critic Choice Award for Best Superhero Series.
Yeah, it's a water cooler show. It really is.
It really is. Yeah, and I'm super happy, no pun intended, that because I mean, right before it came out, I was at a convention and I just found out that like the Tick was getting canceled on Amazon, and I was like, geez, I hope it's not like that where we like get a couple seasons and nobody finds it and then it gets canceled real quick. And I'm like, hey, as long as it gets made, that's cool. But this has really been something.
You made me sad thinking about the Tick.
I'm sorry. Yeah. My friend wrote for that show. I'm sad too.
Yeah. I imagine the distance between, the sort of the zeitgeisty element of like the comic had happened and then there was a length of time and then all of a sudden like it's now back in a form that is like suddenly popular and like much bigger than any comic could be. It was probably an interesting experience.
Well, it's interesting with, like you said about with Anthony, is like he's kind of the face of the show now. And because he's so popular on it, and I didn't see that coming because up until the TV show, if I did a convention, people would be, oh, will you draw me a Butcher? Will you draw me Butcher or Butcher Huey? Sometimes Terror, and nobody asked for Homelander, and that's like the number one request I get now. And I have to keep telling him I can't draw Anthony from memory. It's going to look like he did in the comic.
Is there any concern of like him turning into sort of the Rorschach-esque, where it's like you're not supposed to like him that much?
He's a really bad guy. I actually think that's actually the secret sauce. That's really why Anthony is awesome, because as a person, he's not Homelander at all. He's really not. And
as far as you know,
at the same time, like he knows how to bring that charm in. Yeah. So like episode 1's perfect, where you first see him, like, he just brutally murders a dude, throws him in the air and he crashes into a car, and then the kids are like, "Can we get a selfie?" He's like, "Yeah, of course." And then he's got that great smile, and and when he's trying to keep it together, you could see it. But he's so good. Like he just has so many layers. He brought so many layers to that character that I don't even think we really explored in the comics. The comics had a different take on him and a different reason for him being the way he was. And I don't want to spoil that for anybody because it's a big reveal in the comics. But I really liked both. But I think what Anthony and Eric are doing with it, Eric Kripke, I think what they've done with that character is so much more intriguing. And the Seven in general, like the Seven weren't all that complicated in the comics. They were, they almost were, I kind of half comedy fodder and just sort of there to be foils for the boys. Like, to get to know them. I was speaking of writing and drawing again. At one point, I was going to write and draw this A-Train solo thing that I decided not to do, but it was going to go into his backstory. I was surprised when they did the brothers and then on the racetrack, because that was actually, and nobody ever saw it except for the publisher. And then I decided not to go forward with it. But but that was part of the story that I was going to do A-Train's backstory and how he got to where he was in issue 1. But that was, but as I was writing that, I was realizing how much like those characters, the backstory on the characters hadn't been explored as much as explained. Like we had a reason for everybody, but we didn't really get attached to their personal lives. But we understood that Vogelbaum built them, and this whole World War II thing gone wrong, and
it brings up an interesting question of like we've seen over the last decade how popular superhero and comic book movies have become, and like we said, these zeitgeist things where people that don't read comics, have never read a comic book in their life, are obsessed with these characters and these stories. And it's like you would almost hope that at some point publishers would understand part of the reason is that the creators are given so much more time and energy to make the stories for the films and TV shows than the creators are given for comics. Like, you guys got to pump this stuff out in 30 days.
Word.
And there's no chance that you can have the same sort of depth. Or if you do, it's absolutely amazing that you can do in a TV show like with Amazon, with the resources and the backing and a writer's room and all the time that they're given to produce this. It's really a shame that we don't give that same kind of time to comics, I think.
Well, I mean, it's a different beast, and that's really what it comes down to. What's interesting to me so much is that without the last 10 years of Marvel movies, I don't think the boys would have ever gotten made. It's only because we had sort of like everybody's palate had been softened for the idea of an adult superhero, even though the Marvel movies aren't exactly adult in that regard. Mm-hmm. They are not like where the boys goes with it. But, you had Tony Stark as kind of a, morally compromised dude at the beginning of the movie, and the way Jon Favreau presented him. And I liked that. He was drinking and girls and stuff, he was a playboy and brilliant. But I liked so much that those films, and I'm a big fan of all those movies, and I love the Marvel and the DCU. So for me, I think without those, we wouldn't have been able to. The Boys is such a nice counter programming for what you've already been through, but having a context for what superheroes can be and how they can be really helps, because most people are still grounded in their memories of comics from the childhoods, and that's a very outdated model. I mean, everything kind of changed in the mid 80s with Frank Miller and Alan Moore, they really redirected where comics would go. And up until then, it was, still being very much Super Friends and Batman 1966. And then people started taking those characters seriously because you could put them in a more serious light. You could handle them realistically, which is what Marvel was always great at, without losing the wonder, I guess. But that's really, I think, what's interesting now is that, the success of WandaVision is a really great example of how far we've come, where an audience will go, okay, now what's happening?
I think viewers, like the we'll say comic book, and which we shouldn't, but the superhero viewers are starting to realize something that we realized as comic book fans years ago, is that just because there's a cape and a cowl in it doesn't mean that it can't be a romance story or a crime story or a Western or and that's we'd mentioned Greg Rucka a little while ago. We talked to him years ago now, and he said that's one of the reasons I love doing superheroes is that if I want to, I can write any kind of story I want.
It's really true. It's very true. And I think that that's the limitations of superheroes are only what the creators put on them and what editorial will allow. It really comes down to how great these characters are. And one of the things that I really treasure about having had the career that I've had, and like coming back around to the fact that I'm writing and drawing Batman, like I had my teddy bear when I was a kid was actually a Amigo Batman action figure with the removable cowl. It's like I have such a deep attachment to that character that it occurs to me as I grow older and deeper into this that very few things remain as popular in the zeitgeist as superheroes have. Like the fact that Batman, when they announce a new Batman or a new Batman movie, the internet blows up still, even though there's been a bunch of Batman stuff. And it goes all the way back to the 40s. Same with Superman. It's very few of these characters and a lot of the big Marvel stories that we're just now enjoying have their roots in the 60s when I was born. So the fact that this gets handed over from generation to generation and generations of creators to another generation of creators, that's pretty special. It doesn't happen with pretty much anything else. Music, a song that was super popular in the 40s is highly unlikely to be super popular today, like charting at #1, which these superhero films do.
I mean, say what you will about like the Zack Snyder Justice League thing, but what movie has a studio ever gone back and spent another $70 million?
Another movie's worth of movie.
Yeah, it's insane, really. But so I mean, it speaks to the power of superheroes and how much people are in love with this stuff.
And actually, I'm a big fan of that. I think that that's the way, the open-mindedness behind that, and that there was a demand for it. But I remember when I saw the theatrical version of Watchmen, I liked it, but I didn't like it. Like I was like, oh, the costumes looked good, and there was like a lot. I could tell there was a lot of heart in it, but it felt rushed and it felt truncated, and it had a weird editing, especially towards the last 10 minutes of the theatrical cut. Just don't feel right. And then I bought the extended director's ultimate cut that has all this. It's like 3 hours.
The comic, the pirate story interweaved in it.
The Black Freighter stuff back in there. And then there's like these interviews of the original Owlman or Night Owl on 60 Minutes, but it's done in a 70s style. Really cool stuff like that.
Behind the Mask.
Yeah, it's so rich, so rich. And I walked away from that thinking, okay, well, when this guy's let this guy do his thing, he has a real vision for this. So I've only watched about 15 minutes of the first one because my son wants to watch it with me, and I'd never pass up that opportunity. But I just wanted to get a feel for it. And already the first 15 minutes of the first episode, I'm like, this is tremendously better than the theatrical cut. Like I remember, like things annoyed me in the theatrical cut, like that scene after Batman and Aquaman meet. Arthur Curry takes a big swill off of a bottle and throws it in the ocean. It's Aquaman. He would kick your ass for doing that. Yeah. Why is Aquaman polluting the ocean?
Why is he throwing garbage in the ocean?
Aquaman does not litter.
Not my Aquaman. I'm sorry. I don't mind.
Maybe there's a dolphin out there. He's catching it and taking it to a safe place. I don't know.
I want to see that. I want to see that. I don't want to. Brian's Justice League.
An octopus, friendly octopus out there.
He's drinking it.
Drunk dolphin.
But I just felt like the tone and the tenor and everything, it already is off to a much better start, and I'm much more curious about where it goes. But I like that they gave Zack Snyder like a platform to like, hey, make a 4-hour series out of this, or a 4-episode series out of this movie.
Yeah,
they did the same thing with Hateful Eight for Netflix, and nobody complained.
It's crazy. I mean, it's a polarizing movie. He's a polarizing director, but when something comes out, everybody's talking about it.
Everybody talks about it.
Everybody.
I'm not, if it's good and I enjoy it, I'll say it. If I don't like it, I'll say it. But I mean, it's like, my opinion shouldn't carry anybody else any more weight than anybody else's, other than I love those characters too. And that's about the only place that I would say. Like I said, Aquaman should not be throwing trash in the ocean. That's also I didn't like Batman like killing so many people in Batman versus Superman. Like Batman with machine guns on the Batmobile.
Yeah,
he doesn't like guns. That's kind of a big thing for Batman. Batman's not big on guns.
I have to wrap my head around a 4:3 aspect ratio.
Yeah, why?
I don't know, but it's interesting.
It's weird. It's a little hard at first because I'm just sort of like.
I was like, were you like me, like fiddling with your remote? Like, where's the settings? What did I do?
Well, thankfully they put the disclaimer up beforehand.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, I will say this: after about 15, 20 minutes, I stopped noticing or thinking.
Yeah, I remember people used to bitch about letterbox, and now that's the standard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently the reason that they said it was shot like that is that he was shooting a lot of the original for IMAX.
Which
is stuff that he had is shot in that format because it's much closer to 4:3. But I don't know. It was a big, gigantic, dumb movie with a ton of like really cool moments. But yeah, I'm like, there's just things I don't want to see these characters do. And it's a little too gloomy and nihilistic for me, but whatever.
I'm not a big fan of the dark palette on everybody, but again, I'm not. Nobody's giving me $70 million to make a Justice League movie. If they do and I blow it, we can revisit this conversation.
Sure. Well, I don't want to wrap up before we talk about release dates for Legend of the Dark Knight. And I know that Sal's got another couple questions, but I wanted to get in it. April 2nd, it is releasing digital, correct?
I think that sounds right. I've heard a couple different dates. I know the DC website has the accurate. You can go to the DC site, and they have the accurate release dates.
And it's three. It's 6.
It's
10
6
page
chapters at 10 pages each, and then they'll release them as 3 print issues, and the whole thing is 60 pages. It's a 60-page story that I penciled, inked, and wrote. So.
Well, tell us a little bit about that process, and I mean, you said, I think at the beginning of the show, how excited you are to tell a Batman story. You're writing it and drawing it.
I've loved Batman my whole life, and he's a character that I have artwork that I did before I went mainstream. I used to do paintings and pinups of Batman. He was real popular in '89, as you may remember. But I loved him anyway. I was always a big fan of the character and have been. So this was a really nice opportunity. Ironically, it was a stop-start situation. I got hired to do this back in 2013, and I had done most of the work between 2013 and 2015, and then they canceled the line. And so all this work kind of went into a rabbit hole. And during the time that the DC was moving from New York to Burbank, a lot of things got lost in the shuffle. And this Batman story was one of them. And it wasn't only until recently that Ben Abernathy said, "Hey, I think we have a place for your story." And I didn't know what that meant. I thought maybe 60 pages, maybe be half of an annual or something. But then they came back saying, "No, we're going to relaunch Legends of the Dark Knight, and you're going to be the first story out of the chute." And I was like, because I had done so much work on this, and it's been a labor of love. And I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel with this story as much as just tell a story that means something to me. And it's been fun because it bounces around in time a little bit, and I narrate through Batman through part of it. Some of it is people that have been observing Batman over the course of about 40 to 48 hours that Batman hasn't slept leading up to the beginning of this story. So he's exhausted. And one of the things that always comes back around to me with Batman is that he's just a dude. At the end of the day, he doesn't have any superpowers. His superpower is his mind and his unbreakable will. And that
and his money.
Money helps, but I mean, I think they're even exploring that now in the current series that even without money, he's still Batman. And so, all the money, money can't buy you love. So
it can buy a lot of batarangs, though.
It buys some batarangs, but it can't buy you, more sleep when you need to be sleeping, or But he's vulnerable, and that's so for me. I wrote this story about him kind of going through a horrible endurance and why does he push himself so hard? And so that's what the theme of my story is. But it was great because when I originally did it, I just wanted to have this one scene between Batman and the Joker, and this is the thing I thought up years ago. And my editor came back and said, "We love it. Can you put more villains in it?" And I went, "Yeah." Like, hey, we bought pizza. Would you like more toppings?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah,
So,
that Rogues Gallery. Heck yeah.
Yeah, it was. So I was pretty happy that I ended up getting to write a whole bunch of different Batman villains, and I tried to play with them all in their own unique ways. And again, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but I hope that people enjoy it. I hope I hope I don't drop the ball on the script end of things.
Do you know? So this is the first story of the relaunch of Legends of the Dark Knight, but it's going to be an ongoing series then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they've capped it already, but they do have a number of different Legends of the Dark Knight stories. The nice thing about Legends of the Dark Knight is that it just has to be canon. It doesn't have to be continuity. So like it didn't have to totally fit into a certain point. So at this point of where I set the story was somewhere after the big earthquake and somewhere where Robin's not around anymore. And Batman's just kind of like sad for lack of a better word.
Sad Batman.
It's sad Batman.
Sad
Nice.
Batman.
How tall is Batman? Because I got the answer right in front of me.
What's your
6'2",
guess?
I believe.
What was your guess?
6'2".
Woo, baby, you nailed it. 6'2".
Hey, he wins an
He's
around
got 2
comics.
thumbs and is a comics pro.
Yeah.
There.
Earth 2 and Earth 1 Batman, both 6'2". There you go. There's some consistency.
Win an around comics button for that.
Yeah, Batmite. How tall do you think Batmite is?
Batmite?
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I'd
go
say 3
2
feet.
foot, 2'3".
26 inches.
No, Derek's closest, 2'11".
Well, he is
Comics
a
pro.
professional. He is comics
He's a
pro.
professional.
I have to think about these things way too much.
We do have a question from one of our viewers, if you
Okay.
don't mind. Let's go to Greg Porter. He said he's loving the boys on TV, wondering if they'll be brave enough to for Mother's Milk to power up on screen.
I don't know, and if I did, I couldn't say so. The only thing I can say is that they're gonna do something with Herogasm in season 3 because the showrunner announced that on Twitter. So
Nice. I was shocked that they used love sausage. Like
I was too.
That was amazing.
It was pretty phenomenal. I still have photos of the sculpt for his prosthetic. It was the most horrible thing I've ever seen. Uncut.
I have one more question about the boys. You're probably sick of answering questions about it, but
I'm sick of the fact that there's a lot I can't talk about. So
no. This is about the comic, not about the TV show.
The sun's going down here, so I'm going to turn on my desk light. And
Oh,
I was like, yeah, it's
little mood
getting-
light.
now I look like I'm being interrogated. Where was I?
It's not quite the floating head now. That's good.
Yeah, that's where I was heading. So I thought maybe.
So the legend in
Yes.
the original series, I've always assumed was Stan Lee, or
It's
it was
an
amalgam of Stan Lee.
The only thing that really is like Stan Lee is like his like he was sort of the mascot of that company, but he's much more bitter than Stan ever was.
Yeah, and I guess that was sort of reading that book. I'm I had this weird thing where it's like I'm always delving in, like trying to figure out what you guys are saying or what any comic book creator is saying in between the lines, I guess. And with that one, it was obviously you're playing with a lot of the I think history of comics in some ways, and a lot of possibly stories behind the scenes in comics, and with the legend, it was like it seemed like it was Stan, but then it didn't really seem like it was I was surprised that it wasn't sort of as sarcastic or sardonic a take on that character as maybe I would think it would be.
Well, we weren't out to skewer anybody. I mean, like the truth of the matter is that the root of our story, and mostly from Ennis's side, And it's just imagined a world that if we really had superheroes in it, like it was born of a conversation of, how there's always these battles and there's never any collateral damage. Like people are knocking down buildings, throwing around cars, and like yet nobody gets hurt. He goes, there'd be so many people would die every time. The slightest superhero battle would lead to so much property damage that there's just no way people are walking away unscathed. And if the world believes they are, why is that? So he started exploring that as what if the superheroes existed in our world, they would just be as corrupt as anybody else with power and money.
Part of the firm. Yeah.
So he took a little bit of politics and a little bit of celebrity culture, and like I said, Hollywood casting couches from the 30s and a little bit of James Elroy mystery, and watered them up and then put a cape on it, and he doesn't have the sentimentality for the boys, or sorry, for the superheroes that I did growing up. Like I told you, like Batman was my teddy bear. So I was like, I'm thrilled just to be working, and that's kind of what I bring to I think that's why we have kind of a nice yin yang to what we do with the comics, what we did, because I was just happy to be creating superheroes and drawing superheroes. And I loved Garth's writing. So I knew it was a great script. I knew it was going to be a good story, but at the same time, I got to draw superheroes and it was just fun. I also like drawing like Space Beaver. If you go back to Space Beaver, it was me sort of twisting up, because I have a weird dark sense of humor too. And the original idea behind Space Beaver is I love the idea of these cute cartoon animals that you'd see on Saturday morning, and yet when they get into battles, they would like brains would fly out and blood would spill out. Like that, to me, that made me laugh. Stuffed animals with blood and bones and guts. And then on top of that, and then I tried to make it really like all kinds of pathos and drama and like way over the top, because I thought it was hilarious. Like these fuzzy animals emoting, and I don't think anybody got the joke but me. There were people that were like, oh, I like that story. I'm like, it was supposed to be a joke. But I was a kid. I didn't know. I was just regurgitating what I thought was funny. And but I didn't want to be on the nose with the funny. The funny was supposed to be between the lines. Like, oh, this is it's overly dramatic because it's supposed, that's the part. It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever saw Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
I love. And the thing that makes that movie so good is they play it straight. It's like they don't really go for the over the top jokes. They're playing it straight, and that's what makes it so funny.
Sure.
Did you ever see that there was a puppet movie? Oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it, but it came out and it was kind of horrific. It was about a puppet cop chasing a murderer. But there's a scene. My wife and I were watching it, and
I don't want to see this film now.
There was a scene where they go into a puppet strip club, and there's a lap dance scene with puppets and silly string. That's all I can really.
No, but I'm sold. But I'm thinking of Team America as like they did with the South Park guys did Team America, and they scenes with these mannequins or these
Gary. It's our favorite line out of that movie.
But they're doing, but the over the top sex scenes, but with those like old Jerry Anderson style marionettes.
Yeah, right.
Hilarious.
It's called
that's the kind of thing that makes me laugh. So I just that's so with the boys, just bringing it full circle is that. That's the whole point, is that we were making a statement, not so much about comics, but what comics represent in the zeitgeist of culture. And if these were real, and like if Superman was somebody that you actually saw nightly on the news, and what if in truth, like he was a bad guy, that's where the Homelander comes from. But I never would tear down Superman that way. I wouldn't want to draw a story about Superman doing those things. But like in Superman,
like the Deep would throw a bottle into the ocean and you're cool.
Oh, in a hot minute. And probably at the end of like filming a scene about how you got to clean up the ocean.
Yeah.
It's like he'd be doing a PSA, and then like as soon as he's done, leave trash for someone else to clean up, because the Deep's awful. But that's what makes that work for me, because I remember like also in Superman 3, terrible movie other than when bad Superman goes to the bar.
Yeah, that's the
and you got Superman in that slightly darker Superman costume, Christopher Reeve with a 5 o'clock shadow, just knocking back bourbon. I'm like, daddy happy.
That's gold.
That was just great. Because like they handled it well, and it had a place and a purpose,
Well, you guys, famously, at least, in comics, the boys started out at Wildstorm. It was a DC was publishing through Wildstorm. Was there a point leading up to that where you and Garth Ennis were like, yeah, we might be pushing this one a little?
Well, we were so open about it. We were a little bit surprised when there was like a big reaction from DC, because we didn't really. The book was selling great. I mean, it was a hit, and we were critical. I mean, it was the comic book had a similar reception to the way the TV show is being received now within comics. Like, we were doing really well, and Wildstorm and everybody over at Wildstorm couldn't have been happier. And it wasn't until it got further up the ladder that I guess not everything had been communicated to the higher ups at DC at the time and Warner Brothers, and they were a little bit like. And I understand now looking back on it, because if you read through the old Wildstorm #1, you have grudge sex with Raynor right next to a advertisement for the Justice League, and heads exploding right next to an advertisement for Batman. And so definitely you can see where the line might be getting blurred. But we literally put on the poster Garth's statement that I'm gonna out preacher. That was the goal. We were really clear what we were gonna do. We weren't shy about it, and didn't see the reason that we should be. It's one of the reasons we went to Wildstorm as opposed to trying to do it as a lesser hard-hitting book at DC proper somehow. Because originally the concept for it was going to fit like into the DCU the way Hitman did, and we thought that was the original idea behind it. But then the deeper we got into it, it's like, no, we needed to really. We decided to go with a Watchmen route and like just take characters and use them as archetypes as opposed to trying to tear down the actual characters. Because even Hitman treats the overall, there's funny moments in Hitman, but he has respect for Batman and Superman within that world,
Sure. Well, I remember when it happened, and I mean, it wasn't a question of if, it was just a question of who was going to pick this up and run with it. And it seems like Dynamite was a real good match for you guys.
Yeah, they were. Nick, I have a long relationship with Nick Barucci, and he told me straight up, like, I read this book, I have to publish this book. And I we went there, like, it seemed like a natural fit because Nick and I had we known each other for so long that, and he was so enthusiastic about it that it seemed like a good fit. So, and they've done a great job of like keeping it in print and recollecting it.
Oh yeah, the omnibus editions are
those
awesome.
Omnibuses are really nice. I really like that. It's a good package for the money too. Yeah.
All right. Well, we don't want to overstay our welcome. Sal, you have one more question?
I have another question. Well, this is a general question, email we got, but I figured Darick could answer this as well. Him being a comic book fan as well as a creator. It's from Wes. It said, hey guys, I was curious what your favorite C or D list characters in comics were. Personally, I've always enjoyed getting to see Detective Chimp show up for an issue in a random DC comic. So, Darick, any favorite C or D list character?
Yeah, most of my favorites are C and D list. My favorite New Warrior was Speedball. I love drawing him. I loved Elongated. I liked Elongated Man. He was a lot of fun to draw with when I was drawing Justice League Europe. And I just enjoyed the hell out of those Kevin Maguire, J.M. DeMatteis, and Keith Giffen Justice Leagues, because most of those characters at the time were like, C and D list characters, and yet they made them vibrant and interesting and funny. Yeah. So, out of this Plastic Man count, I still love him. And and I like Squirrel Girl. She's had a revival, but I liked her when she wasn't popular.
Nice. I was always a D-Man fan. I was such a Daredevil fan. It was like, I like the idea of like a sort of broken, bizarro world Daredevil character.
Yeah.
I also, when they brought Jamie Madrox back and sort of delved into his character a bit more in the X-Men.
Oh, those X Factor, that entire X Factor run was
excellent. Peter
David stuff, right?
Yeah. I loved that series.
That was good stuff.
Yeah, Ryan Sook art. That's when I fell in love with Ryan Sook.
Yeah, it's
so good.
Guy keeps raising the bar.
one of those guys. What who are the it artists for you like right now? That if you see anybody on the stands that you're just like, yeah, I gotta. This is I don't. I don't.
I hate answering this question because then I feel like I'm leaving somebody out. But just somebody whose stuff like just constantly blows me away is Doc Shaner. I love Doc Shaner's stuff. Every time I see it, it's like it revives the boyhood love of those characters for me. I think Ryan Sook's doing amazing work. But I'm also not very good at staying contemporary with comics at the moment because I don't have a shop near me or anything. So I'm really just kind of embedded in my own world. But if I see them, I see some of their stuff on Twitter or I come across it when I do a store sign and I kind of stock up and catch up on the last few years of what I've been missing out on. But but Doc Shaner just jumped to mind when you asked. I mean, the guys I loved back in the 80s, I still love now too. Like, Brian Hitch and I'm totally terrible with names, but I love Brian Hitch. Adam Hughes and Kevin McGuire still are doing incredible work. Love their stuff.
Hey, can I ask you a question? It's another Space Beaver question, but
sure. I like talking about that. I find it funny that people want to talk about him.
In some of the issues, I noticed like there were almost like airbrushed looking covers. No,
it was a weird. That's a weird. I had a lot of like help from friends and friends of friends at that stage of my career because I was just getting going. So the first issue, my friend Gene and I, we watercolored the covers. Like he did the front cover, I did the back cover. His watercolors were much better than mine, but I drew everything. His mother was a professional painter. She used to paint portraits of horses for people and has some pieces in museums. She's a really talented lady, really knew how to paint animals. Animals were her specialty. And so we got a wild hair up our ass. And I'm like, hey, if I drew it, could you paint it? So like the really good oil painted covers for
there's a couple of covers that are just like, what the hell? I mean,
no, they're beautiful. And like
really
I couldn't paint on that level, but that's my drawing underneath. So and then but she helped out, like she kind of taught me a little bit about how to paint. And there are varying degrees of competency in there, but you can see some are better than others. And then at one point, I think the only airbrush cover that I remember was issue 11. And it's really funny because this was like the end of the Space Beaver run because I walked away from it at that point. It wasn't making any money and it was just a big drag and I was starting to get work professionally and I just didn't have time for it. And I didn't think anybody was reading it anyway because the publisher was constantly complaining about how much money he was losing on it. And what was really funny is that they did an airbrushed cover from a drawing I did. They got this guy to airbrush it for number 11. And then the art got damaged on the way to the printer because this was the old days before digital. And they printed it with the damage on. It's visible on the cover. And I'm like, man, that's time, baby.
Hey, we had to do what we had to do.
Gotta do it.
Had to hit the presses, man.
Are you working digital or traditional now, or a combination?
I still work traditional. I do pen and ink and pencil, just the way I always did. And but I scan it and then I add effects and clean it up on Photoshop. So I draw, because back in the day, if you wanted to put tones on your work, you had to buy this stuff called Zipatone and had an adhesive back on it, and it was really expensive. And
I am a 48-year-old graphic designer.
You know exactly what I'm talking about with Zipatone.
I've got Frisket.
You even kept the scraps because you never know when you might have an eyeball to patch or something. Yep. So I wanted it to be. Instead, I learned to crosshatch. So a lot of Space Beaver was heavily crosshatched. But now it's like I can drop tone in digitally, so I do that. Like I like to, my black and white stuff is very lush and layered in different levels of gray on top of black and white ink art that I start with.
Yeah, it's all got to be digital at some point now. So
yeah, a lot of people have gone digital. I can't quite make that jump. It just feels too. I don't know. There's something very satisfying about having original art when you're all done with when you're all done with a project, and it makes, people will purchase it, and also like it makes a nice gift, and there's something. It's almost like a diary, that I'm like I know what I did with my time. If it's black and white digital art.
Mhm.
So I can show this. I'm digging through my drawer here. So this is a finished black and white piece. This is my first cover for Justice League Last Ride. They've announced this, so I can show the art.
Oh, cool.
So you can get an idea of what it looks like before it goes to the scanner.
Very cool.
So I draw a non-photo blue, and then I ink over that, and and then I do final cleanup when it gets to the when I get.
And you sell your original art yourself, right? You
my wife does. My wife deals with my original art. We keep it in the family. Oh yeah, you guys have been looking at this all day. Here you go. There's the original art.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
That's the cover for number 1.
Yeah,
I used that on the.
So you can see all the I put the bats in there, and I put a lot of work into the originals.
And I know it's good for you, and it's great for artists. I love it, and I'm not complaining at all. Does it kind of blow you away how the price on original art has just skyrocketed in the last few years?
Because we're sitting on a lot of my stuff because my wife, we've always been of the mind of we wanted to go to the hands of people that are going to really want it rather than turn it around as a product. And so we do layaway plans and things like that, and she handles it all. It's very personal. It's like not you can go to DarickRobertson.com and get a hold of her if you have something in mind you want. And the boys stuff has gone way up in value because of the show, but now it's I'm happy to see that happening because I have a lot of original art still.
Sure. It's an income stream.
I started putting away like first issues for my kids, so I have like all of Wolverine #1, put away in a drawer intact. And I have all of, I learned my lesson on Transmetropolitan because I let that stuff go really willy-nilly, and I regret that.
Yeah, I talked to Tony Moore about some of the early Walking Dead pages that he sold off, and the regret for that. I was lucky. I was lucky enough to talk to Neil Adams at a convention. It was kind of a walk and talk interview, and we just happened to walk by a dealer who had the cover of the Superman Ali comic, and it was like $25,000 or something. It was it wasn't the cover, it was the inside splash page, and you just I noticed him just kind of look at it and just kind of shake his head a little bit.
Because this is it's hard for creators in that regard. Like we have to make a living, and it's not like anybody is really getting super rich doing comics unless you start your own toy company or something.
You kind of can't know what's going to be huge, like what's going to be worth something and what's
you don't. And that's the thing when you're living through it. That's the thing. That's the irony. Like Transmetropolitan was we were barely staying afloat, and like they was a constant threat of being canceled. It wasn't selling really well in the day. It does much better now than it did back in the day when it was coming out as a monthly book. It wasn't. It had a cult following. It wasn't that popular. And then even with the boys, it's like it's much more popular now because it's got the world's greatest advertisement on television for it. But it did good, but it didn't do like it's doing now. It's insane. But I'm I'm not unhappy about it. It's just weird.
Speaking of Transmet, just a question popped in my head real quick, but was there ever any connection or did you ever hear from?
Can I finish the question for you?
Yes, please.
Alan Moore, is that what you're going to ask me?
No, I wasn't. Hunter S. Thompson. I was going to ask.
Yes, actually, Hunter S. Thompson was an influence on the.
No, I knew that, but I didn't know if it had ever gotten back to him or
it did. Actually, I can't prove this, but I swear on the souls of my children, this is absolutely true. Back in the early days of the internet, when the book was first coming out, Hunter S. Thompson had a website, and one of the earliest websites I had ever traveled to, and he had a whole thing. I don't know if he wrote it or whoever ran his website. It was his official website with this symbol and his logo and everything. It was like HunterSThompson.com or something like that. But he had a thing about Transmetropolitan on it, and apparently he did like it. So
awesome.
That made me happy because I know he doesn't always like he doesn't like the interpretations of him, and he didn't like the Doonesbury thing very much. But apparently he really did like Transmetropolitan and had nice things to say about it. And I wish I knew how to do a screen grab back then, but I mean, literally having PCs, and that was still in the days when you had to listen to the dial-up modem to get on to online.
Yeah, you could have saved that screen grab to a floppy disk.
Yeah, you saved it to a floppy disk. You waited a half hour to download a couple photos.
Well, since you brought up Alan Moore, did you ever hear from Alan Moore on?
No, because it was never based on him. I didn't even know what Alan Moore looked like.
Really?
That's my friend Andre Ricciardi. It's if you have the absolute editions, there's even a photograph of Andre modeling as Spider for me. And Andre, if you Google right now, if you Google the name Andre Ricciardi, he comes up with the way he looked, and he has that big hair and that crazy beard. Mm-hmm. That was his regular.
I never got to add. Yeah,
I
never got the Alan Moore. I mean, I thought
thank God. I keep getting asked that. They thought we were doing something about Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, and we weren't, because Grant had hair when I was drawing Transmetropolitan, and I'd never met or seen Alan Moore because that was like kind of pre-internet days, so you didn't really know what creators look like.
No, I always assumed it was Hunter. It was influenced by Hunter. I mean,
him and another an amalgam of a few different journalists that Warren was really following. I was a Hunter S. Thompson fan. Warren's knowledge of politics and journalism was much better than mine. So
I mean,
stop watering.
Yeah, we just did it as a book of the month, the first volume, and it was kind of both amazing and really scary how well it's aged, and
it really bothers me how well it's aged, because that was us thinking like, this is some crazy shit in the future. Yeah. Like, and the funniest
the future
thing
is here.
All the things I imagined, I didn't imagine an iPhone.
We talked about that. There were definitely things in there that you imagined.
I saw a Google Glass, but I didn't see an iPhone.
Yeah. It's funny. I just read an article by another comic book writer who was writing about Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, and it was not a flattering look back at something 35 years old. And one of the things that stuck with me was, like, he talked about how he felt the main thesis of that book was about how Batman felt that the world was ruined by limp-wristed liberals, and it needed a real man to sort of, take charge and do. And it's like, well, that's one way of certainly looking at it, I think, but it's like, well, was he prescient in his writing in Dark Knight Returns? I mean,
he was really basing like a lot of what was happening in present day. It's kind of like what we did with Transmet. Like we were looking back with Transmet. Like Warren was, a lot of what he was talking about was Nixon, and Watergate and those scandals, and a little bit of Tony Blair and what was going on over in England at the same time, and things that I didn't fully understand, but he made me wake up to what was happening in politics. Sorry, everybody. But I learned a lot, and I learned to start paying attention and following journalism and doing my homework, and so it was interesting. And I think that Dark Knight was a statement on it, what was happening at the time. Like it was like Reagan's in it. Like there's pictures of Reagan and drawn into it. So,
well, I used to think, I was literally thinking about this today because I read something else, and I was thinking about Dark Knight Returns and how it's wavered from times from me being like, this just feels like some 80s urban blight, like paranoia fantasy, to being like, oh wait, actually no, like this idea of like the framing device of these two people arguing, on the news constantly, and just like how much of it's just that, and it's like, actually it's become relevant somehow again.
Right, but there's stuff that doesn't age at all, like the mutants with their Cyclops visors and
I mean,
slice and dice, and then and some of it that's like, if you really look at it, it's hilarious, like Batman showing up to fight this guy in a tank.
Yes,
he literally has a tank, and he just drives it through Gotham and shows up at their mud pit to kick their ass. He's got a tank, but he jumps out and fights them hand in hand.
Because one of his superpowers is that he's fucking.
Because he's badass. He's Batman.
You bring a tank and you don't use it. You can get out of it.
Yeah, you gotta get there somehow.
Ego's a bitch, man. Ego can fuck with you. Make you jump out of your own tank and fight a guy hand to hand.
Right.
I'm gonna fight these mutants.
I think the part that really broke my heart was one-armed Green Arrow, fighting Superman. What he did with Superman, I thought, was like the really undercurrent. That was the most interesting part of that story. Because when I go back and read it again, I'm like, Superman's a more interesting character than Batman in that. But it's because of how subtle he played that. Like, what do you do? And that's a little bit of where, that untapped power working for the government.
Right.
Yeah, for my brain in 1986, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Is it the lesser of two evils? I still get to do good, but under the leash,
right?
Sort of, yeah.
And ultimately, Kent's a farm boy. He's going to want to do the right thing. He's going to be a Boy Scout in the American way. So it's sad that things don't age. That we are, I think, as a culture, we are making a mistake by judging things too harshly without considering them being a product of their time. I think the way they handled the Muppet thing was smart. Like, they didn't not show them.
They didn't pull it.
Hey, look, this hasn't aged well. Watch it if you're cool.
We've learned.
Here it is.
Yeah.
But the people that are like, how dare you say that it didn't age well? Well, it didn't, and there's racist, but long before current days, they were pulling racist Looney Tunes off the air. Like, there's some really shocking Looney Tunes stuff.
We're comic book fans.
Right.
You want to, you strive to be an Eisner nominated, Eisner winning creator. Eisner was amazing. Yes. Some of the Spirit comics are really racist.
But he apologized.
Really racist.
But he went back and said I never saw him as a bad character, but like that character that ran around with him was like total minstrel show, and that's not cool.
Yeah, I appreciate the heads up from Disney. Yeah, I appreciate the heads up. Hey,
let's just be. I mean, we just need to be at a point where we're honest about it. If we're having a conversation about this stuff, because when you pretend it didn't happen, that's worse, because then it's primed to happen again.
So I can turn to my son and be like, don't repeat this joke. That's I'm waiting for the back. I mean, it's like I said, it's already kind of coming at me a little bit with this, that Screen Rant article saying well, they really did this thing in the comic that was awful to Annie. I'm like, no, you're misinterpreting that. And I mean, it was awful in the sense she was put in an awful situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I'm saying is that, but in context, she makes a terrible choice when she didn't have to.
Well, I think sometimes we confuse the idea of putting fictional characters in awful situations as the same thing as putting real people in awful situations.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. Like, they were talking about violence, and I said, if you told me that tomorrow nobody would kill anybody ever again, and the whole world would be nice to each other, if I never drew another exploding brain beaver character, I will not draw that anymore. But unfortunately, I don't think, when my little bit of ink and my wasted paper, nobody gets hurt. It's just an idea. And and they always find a different thing throughout the decades to blame stuff on for society's ills. It's never poverty or things that we should actually be addressing.
It's video games.
War. Yeah, well, it was, but what video games was Genghis Khan playing? Because he was a bastard.
He did some pretty horrible.
I think that was GTA 2.
But it's funny, but there's this book, Seduction of the Innocent, written by Frederick Worthen back in the 50s, that looked at all the superheroes at the time and said, oh, Superman is a Nazi and Batman and Robin are homosexual, and that's bad, according to the book.
Wonder Woman's all about bondage, which was true.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Okay.
That's true.
That was based on reality.
That's true.
That one's real.
Oops. But at the same time, ironically, she became this feminist icon. So no, I just think that but that was the 50s, and then they started saying that horror comics were driving kids to be violent, and then so they shut EC Comics down, yet violence didn't go away. You know,
well, that was the
in the 60s.
you know,
It was the hippies, in the 70s it was the punk rockers and the metalheads, and and all that stuff. In the 80s,
Rap music,
video games, and punk rock. And
my son saw these mutants in a Batman comic wearing visors.
Right.
And now he's running with the street gang.
He's all ripped and walking around shirtless.
He's ripped.
Loves
Smiling the fangs.
I have to fight him constantly.
Makes dinner time awkward.
Yeah, show up in my tank.
So anyway, I think that I noticed that the goalposts keep moving because they don't want to confront things that might actually be causing crime and violence. They want to put it on the easy targets, like, hey, you're talking or you're doing entertainment with violence in it, so it must be your fault. So
yeah, it's a weird time for sure in that sense, and things keep changing and evolving. And for the like I said, I think a lot of it is obviously for the good. The idea of, hey, this is a bad thing, we should examine it.
Yeah, well, we're oversaturated with content right now. There's just like, we are living in a very you guys that are close to my age, you'll remember there was a time when this stuff had a cap on it. Like, if you wanted to see your TV show, you waited a week. And then you got to see another episode the next week. And when that show went away, you didn't see it again. And then, and same thing with like movies, like a movie, you bought a ticket, you saw the movie, and that was it. And you go, wow, it was a great movie. And you didn't think you were ever going to see it again. Now we live in a time where you're like, any movie you want, boom. Any TV show that you can remember, boom. It's all there. We're living in an oversaturation of riches, in that we can go to any time. You go to YouTube, you can find anything. That weird thing you kind of remember, you'll find it on YouTube. I literally remember watching this short cartoon called I Like to Read While I'm Driving. And for years I couldn't, and it has a little song in it. It's kind of weird psychedelic animation. And there's a guy, like, he likes to literally, just like it says, I like to read while I'm driving. And it got stuck in my head. And I always thought it was really funny because he keeps getting in accidents. I found that cartoon. It was like made in like 79. But it's out there. I mean, any weird thing you can kind of remember.
Oh, I'm finding Sal's puppet movie later on tonight, man.
I got it. You got to send me a link.
It's called. I can tell you what it's called. I did find it. It's called.
I got to see the Puppet Strip Club.
It's
the Happy Time Murders.
Happy Time Murders. It's with Melissa McCarthy.
That's recent. That's with Melissa McCarthy. Yeah, I started to watch that. It made me laugh because I didn't get that far into it. But sex puppets, I called it. Sex puppets. That was just something I threw on a calendar in the issue 1, and then Warren's like, "What's that about?" And so it became Spider's favorite show. So.
Oh man, those books are so great because you can just go through. Like I said, we did the first volume as sort of a book of the month, and just rereading again. It had been a long time since I had read it again, so after so many years, you sort of have a different perspective on things. And it was just all the little details, all the little things you guys threw in there, the world building, and just the crazy, wacky stuff that the world that Spider was dealing with and that he hated. And like I said, I mean, so much of it now is just sort of like, that's kind of where we're at. I've seen that. That's not that unfamiliar, and it's a little terrifying in some ways.
A little terrifying. We haven't got the holographic TV screens yet either. So, but we have 3D printers.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's coming. Yeah, Hunter S. Thompson and George Carlin are two people that I'm equally glad that they don't have to see this, and disappointed that we don't get to get their reactions.
I'd add Bill Hicks to that list.
Oh, sure. Well, now you're talking Sal's language.
Yeah. I'd love to hear Bill Hicks sounds contemporary now, and that's amazing because he was in the 90s.
Absolutely. I think, those guys checked out probably at the right time. I don't know if their brains could have handled what, the society we're dealing with.
Carlin would have lost it. He would have lost it.
His words hold true.
Yeah. I mean, could you imagine Hicks? I can't even imagine the idea of like people telling him that there's things he cannot say on stage.
Yeah.
He would just say everything. I mean, he would get crucified, but my God, he would
Lenny Bruce all over again.
Mm-hmm.
More things change. That's why you end up doing. That's how come you can do a comic book about the future in the 90s and then have it seem fresh.
Yeah, well, scarily so.
It's doing well. That's the good thing. It's
Thank you.
Congratulations on all the success with it, because
Thank you.
it is doing phenomenal.
I hope you like my Batman story.
Looking
can't
forward
I had to do all this just so I could get back into mainstream comics.
I just had to have a #1 TV show on a streaming service.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. No, actually, I went off and did it. You were saying earlier, like it looked like I wasn't putting a lot out. I actually did a lot of work that didn't see the light of day for a long time. Space Bastards, for example, I did the whole thing and finished it in 2019. It's just coming out now. So, and then I did a few projects that were supposed to go somewhere and kind of fell apart. I did a run on Renegade or Harbinger Renegades at Valiant that no one seems to remember, but that was a monthly book for me for a while. But
yeah, it's interesting
sort of
how
like, I was just sort of like in and out of but I was always trying to work on original stuff, and it just, right now I'm after Hellblazer, I'm sort of happy just doing mainstream stuff for a little while. So I got a lot of fun gigs I can't elaborate too much on, but I got the rest of my year is looking like I'm going to be pretty busy at DC.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see some creators that just kind of go away for a while, and more it seems like the secret projects that while I was working on something for a year that I couldn't talk about, we would talk to Gabriel Hardman, and we'd be like, yeah, Gabriel, what are you working on? He's like, I spent the last 9 months storyboarding Inception with Christopher Nolan, so that's why I'm not doing Agents of Atlas or whatever. So
can you maybe pitch you and Garth doing a nice long Lobo? Black Label Lobo story, maybe.
I might I'd like to do some more Black Label stuff. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, we need to let this man go. I think we're probably audio wise we'll split this into 2 episodes, because we're creepy. I told Darick today, it's like, we're usually about an hour. So
I know. I remember from last time we ran over too, but I like talking to you guys. So it's like there's people that know when we have this stuff in common. It's like there's a lot to talk about. So
we've had that effect before on people. Like we go, it'll be 45 minutes, and 3 hours later, it's
we love it. Had a two and a half hour 30-minute conversation with John Byrne years ago, which was that was a kick. So sometimes we go over, but sir, thank you. You please know that you are welcome back anytime to chat with us. It's been fantastic.
My Batman story, have me back on when you finished reading all 6, the last one, and let me know.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan. Absolutely.
I'll be able to announce some stuff then, probably.
Very good. Well, sir, thank you. We won't bore you with all of our end of episode pitching and all that. So we'll just say goodbye and see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darick. Everybody. All right. That was awesome.
All right. That was Darick Robertson.
Yep. Check out DarickRobertson.com.
I had so much more, but it was like we were almost at 2 hours, and it's just like, God, this guy's been in the industry and done some really. I didn't even get to talk about the Punisher book he did with Garth Ennis, Born, which is one of my favorite Punisher stories, and he's awesome. But we'll have him back.
I didn't talk much about the Greg Rucka Wolverine series, so
right.
Tell me about Greg Rucka. What was it like to work with him?
Yeah, but I mean, just awesome, nice guy. As you would expect. It's great talking to him. So remember April, I believe it's April 2nd, digital release on Legends of the Dark Knight. And then I think in May, like late May, they'll start releasing the single issue comics at your local comic shop. And it's a total of 60 pages. Yeah, 60 pages. So 3 issues of that will be Darick.
Nice.
And The Boys season 3 is filming.
The Boys season 3 is filming, and Space Beaver was collected in 2000, so it might be available out there. And
Go find it.
Go find
Space.
It
was AIT Planet Noir collected.
And as always, don't forget that We have a Patreon page. Our Patreon page is at patreon.com/aroundcomics, where you can get all sorts of bonus material, bonus episodes, 30 minutes with interviews by Chris, Tom versus the Freedom Fighters with Tom, Future Stacks for me, ACTV. We're now doing The Falcon and The Winter Soldier.
After hours.
After hours. Episode 1 just came out. So please, if you'd like to get more content from us, bonus episodes, sign up. It's only $5 a month. Unless you want more stuff, there's like stickers or you just want to give us more money. We're not opposed to that.
How much do you want from us?
But just $5. $5. We did have another Patreon sign up this week, so thank you very much to Andrew Nikovich. Thank you, Andrew, for becoming a patron. Really appreciate your support for the show. And so go to Patreon and get more of us.
Yeah.
There's just more. And if you'd like to get stuff, official Around Comics merchandise, like this t-shirt that I'm wearing, which I have to say is pretty nice.
That is pretty dope.
I just got it in. You can get that at aroundcomics.com/shop. And I think there might actually be a sale going on right now. So go check it out, aroundcomics.com/shop. And
every other Thursday, you can see Sal and I transform into elves. And not literally.
Metaphorically.
That's the AC D&D. That's our D&D group. So that's been a hoot. I think we rolled for initiative twice.
Come on, man! It's role playing. It's not.
I want to shoot things.
Well, you shot a zombie or a skeleton, and
I shot a skeleton. Yes.
Yeah, you shot a skeleton. What are you crying about? Come on.
What happened when you shot the skeleton?
I killed it again.
I was gonna say, I mean, skeleton. I don't know if you shot it with a gun or with
a hand bow, a hand crossbow.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Those work on skeletons.
Those were. I was gonna say gun versus skeleton. It just seems like
a lot of empty spaces to go.
What's gonna happen?
It's true.
There's no telling.
All right. Yeah. So there's all that fun stuff. Please contact the show, info@aroundcomics.com, or hit us up on any of the social media. I think that's it. You buy Darick Robertson comics, watch The Boys, Peace in the Middle East, all that good stuff.
Peace in the middle. Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're really reaching for it. All right.
If you donate $25, we'll
$25 a month. We'll work on Peace in the Middle
East. Yeah.
No guarantees. I mean, but we'll work on it. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah. This is our Thursday night live video cast, which gets archived and then released as an audio show on Tuesdays. There goes my camera. That's all I got, man. Are we good?
I think we're good. That was almost 2 hours. I think we're done for the evening.
All right, cool.
In the meantime,
we'll be everywhere in
and around comics.
Right. How did we keep Tom that entire time?